Hi, I'm Kazaya. At my recovery party, yes, a party meant to celebrate my survival, my sister handed me a bowl of soup she said she made herself. 10 minutes later, my throat started closing. Turns out she'd slipped allergy meds into it, meds that trigger my worst reactions. But that wasn't the worst part. The worst part was realizing the soup was just the beginning. My medical records were altered, my signature forged, and my own family stood behind her, smiling. What kind of celebration ends with silence, suspicion, and a courtroom? What happens when the people who claim to protect you are actually rewriting your life story? The lanterns glowed softly against the dusk sky as I stepped through the arched courtyard of my mother's home in Santa Fe. Early spring in New Mexico still carried a slight chill, but the air tonight was unusually still. Still, too rehearsed. The garden had been strung with white lights, the kind that whisper elegance without sincerity. A table of hors d'oeuvres stood off to the side, untouched and overly curated, like everything else tonight. I adjusted the hem of my navy dress, a modest cut, one I had chosen for the small dinner I had suggested. That suggestion had been laughed off, of course. "Oh, sweetie, it's a celebration. You don't just sip soup and toast with water." That had been Valora's version of compromise: ignore and override. As I stepped into the main foyer, I was greeted by applause. Not for me. Callista had just walked past with a glass of champagne and was basking in the attention like a seasoned Broadway lead. Valora clapped the loudest. "Oh, Kazaya, there you are," Valora said without turning toward me. "Darling, the guests are in the back. Don't hover in the doorway." I wasn't late. I wasn't early. I was simply unnecessary. I forced a smile and made my way in. There were guests I vaguely recognized from my mother's church, her yoga group, even a few of Callista's clients from her wellness consulting brand. And yet not one person greeted me with more than a nod. No introductions, no toast, no acknowledgement. Just the occasional glance in my direction, followed by polite smiles reserved for background characters. The table settings bore handwritten cards. Callista's read "The Light of the Family." Mine? It didn't exist. I sat at an empty spot beside the bathroom door. It felt like walking into a movie I hadn't been cast in, but I was expected to know my lines. Dinner began. Chatter filled the space, and laughter rose in intervals, all of it circling Callista. The catered dishes arrived, lavish and precisely plated. Then came the soup. "I made this one," Callista said, setting a bowl in front of me with exaggerated care. "For your recovery. Homemade, just like old times." Old times? We never had homemade soup memories, but I nodded anyway. I was being watched. "Try it," she said, her voice light, but her eyes sharp. "It'll help you sleep like a baby." I dipped the spoon, brought it to my lips. A hint of rosemary. Something else. Bitter, just under the surface. Medicinal? No, maybe I was imagining it. I smiled. "It's good." Her lips curled upward. Not a smile. A performance. I ate 3 spoonfuls, maybe 4. The texture was smooth. The flavor odd, but not offensive. I wanted to believe it was genuine. That maybe, just maybe, we'd turned a corner. 10 minutes later, the room began to blur. My breath felt shallow. My throat, scratchy. I reached for my water glass, sipping slowly. Maybe it was just the wine. Maybe it was nerves. Valora noticed me fidgeting and leaned over. "You're always so dramatic when it's about you." Her voice wasn't cold. It was bored. I excused myself and walked to the guest bathroom, locking the door behind me. The mirror showed a face slightly flushed, eyes beginning to water. I ran cold water over my wrists and stared at my reflection. "Am I really this desperate for attention?" I whispered. "Is that what this is?" A memory flashed. 6th grade. School lunch. Peanut oil in the dressing. My throat closed halfway through the second bite. The nurse had called and called. Valora never came. Adela did. My grandmother. The only one who had ever dropped everything for me. Even when I was dying, I was never the priority. I leaned over the sink, breathing slow. I had an epinephrine pen in my purse, but I hadn't needed it in years. Was I overreacting? Was it even an allergy? My phone buzzed in my bag. A single text from Lazaro. Whatever happens tonight, don't eat anything Callista gives you. I'll explain later. I looked at the half-empty bowl on the vanity beside me, and for the first time, I felt fear that didn't come from within. I clenched the fork like it was a lifeline, but there was no appetite left in me, just unease curling like smoke through my ribs. Lazaro's message replayed in my head. Whatever happens tonight, don't eat anything Callista gives you. I hadn't touched another spoonful since, and now my stomach twisted, not from hunger, but from the dread of what might already be inside me. My throat felt oddly dry, like I had spoken too much or not enough. I pushed the soup bowl away. It was still warm, still innocently beige and fragrant. But the warmth on my tongue had faded. Now it felt like an aftertaste that lingered too long, suspicious, unwanted. I dabbed my napkin against the corners of my mouth, pretending to engage in the surrounding hum of voices. Across the room, Callista laughed, carefree, as if nothing in the world required effort or empathy. She clinked glasses with one of the guests, and their eyes drifted to me like I was an empty chair with a name no one could pronounce. The sound of silver tapping against crystal drew my attention. Valora stood by the main table, that perfect hosting smile fixed like dried paint. "Everyone," she chimed, "a few words to honor this beautiful moment." I expected a mention, a glance, even the faintest nod. Instead, she gestured toward Callista. "We're grateful for family, especially for those who stepped up when things were uncertain. Callista, thank you for organizing this evening, for holding everything together during Kazuya's recovery." There it was. My recovery, her accomplishment. Polite claps filled the air. Callista tilted her head modestly, lips pursed in faux humility, soaking in the praise like it was her birthright. I sat perfectly still. If I moved, I feared something might spill. Dignity, anger, truth. Even my pain had to wear her name tag. I rose quietly, murmuring something about needing air, and slipped into the hallway. From there, I watched them. My family, my mother's friends, neighbors I barely remembered, all orbiting around Callista like she was the sun and I was some burnt-out satellite. I leaned against the wall, breathing slowly, replaying every line from Valora's speech. Uncertain. Held together. Not once did she say strong, resilient, or even Kezia. Just absence wrapped in applause. A hand brushed my shoulder lightly. One of the women from church, I forgot her name, smiled gently. "You must be so proud of your sister. She really held it down for you." I managed a nod. "She's good at that." Back at the table, I reached for my water. My wrist brushed the bracelet. A silver medical ID I hadn't removed in years. Nut allergy. Severe. The lettering had faded from time, but not from memory. I took a sip, hoping it would ground me. Then the itching began. At first, it was subtle. A whisper against the skin beneath my eyes, a prickle at the edges of my mouth. My chest felt tight. Not in a dramatic, cinematic way, but in that quiet, creeping way your body warns you when something is off. I swallowed and glanced around. No one noticed. Or maybe no one cared. Valora finally met my gaze from across the room. She arched a brow and mouthed, "Are you okay?" When I didn't answer fast enough, she walked over and leaned in. "You're always so dramatic when it's about you," she whispered, her smile never breaking. "Don't make a scene." I wanted to scream. Instead, I nodded. I reached into my bag beneath the table, fingers brushing the EpiPen. It was still there, untouched. My hand trembled around it, unsure whether to act or wait. What if it was anxiety? What if it wasn't the soup? What if I jabbed myself in front of everyone and gave them the performance they already expected? I sat down slowly, focusing on the rise and fall of my breath. In, pause. Out, hold. Repeat. I imagined waves in my chest, smoothing the tide. Around me, the party buzzed on. Laughter swelled, a toast clinked, and someone shouted Callista's name like she was a headliner at a gala. My chair had never felt colder. Then I saw him, Lazaro. He entered through the side door, uninvited, unnoticed at first. He scanned the room until his eyes locked on mine. His face was grim, serious in a way that didn't match the light or the wine or the flowers. He didn't speak, just gave me a slight shake of the head, subtle but sharp. Then he mouthed two words. Don't. Eat. My hand froze mid-reach for my glass. My stomach clenched again. This wasn't about nerves. It wasn't about attention. And I sure as hell wasn't crazy. I clenched my fork, but it wasn't hunger I was fighting. I stepped out of the dining room, letting the door close softly behind me. My fingers still clutched the cold metal of the fork from earlier, but my grip had loosened. I didn't need it anymore. Not to eat, not to pretend. The hallway was dimly lit, a soft amber glow stretching across familiar family portraits that lined the wall. At the far end, right before the archway into the living room, hung a large frame tribute collage. Gold lettering on black matting. The words, Callista Through the Years, gleamed proudly under the light. I stopped. Every milestone, her ballet recital at 5, her art show in college, the influencer award she won last year, was represented in high-resolution printouts, some with headlines clipped from local newspapers. And not a single photo of me. Not one. They built a timeline, I whispered, and left me out of it, like I'd died years ago. The absence didn't hurt as sharply as it used to. It stung differently now, like pressing on a bruise that had never quite healed. As I turned toward the corner of the dining area, something else caught my eye. My name, misspelled, sat in slanted cursive on a folded card. It was meant for me, the only seat that didn't have a plate or utensil set when I arrived. What made it worse was that the name scribbled there wasn't even mine. It was Callista's middle name, not mine. I wasn't a guest. I was a placeholder, a stand-in for civility. I walked away before the bitterness could settle too deep. As I crossed the hallway toward the kitchen, a little boy darted past me, maybe 7 or 8, dressed in a button-down that looked a size too big. He paused, looked up, and asked innocently, "Are you one of the waitresses?" I blinked. "No, I'm not." He nodded, unconvinced, and ran off. The moment dragged me back in time. Another family event, another celebration, where I stood quietly behind a counter serving lemonade while Valora introduced Callista to everyone as the future of the family. That day, I wasn't introduced at all. I had held my nursing school certificate in my bag, folded 3 times. Never got to pull it out. Later, I'd seen a post on Callista's feed. Proud to represent our family's dedication to service, with my certificate propped behind her mimosa. I walked into the guest room and shut the door quietly behind me. The hum of chatter from the other side of the house faded, replaced by my own shallow breath. I sat on the edge of the bed and pulled my handbag onto my lap. Inside was a folded piece of paper, the original speech I'd written. The one Valora said was too personal, too raw, to be appropriate for the event. I unfolded it slowly. My handwriting was uneven, written during one of the last nights I spent in the hospital, lit by the pulse of the monitor and the nurse's soft humming at shift change. I read the first paragraph out loud. I didn't expect to wake up the second time, but I did. And when I did, I wasn't grateful in the way people expect. I was angry that my life could have ended without ever being mine. My voice caught, not from sorrow, but from the fury of being erased while still breathing. I stopped reading when the ink began to blur. My phone buzzed on the nightstand. "Lazaro, need to talk. I'm outside." I stood up slowly, wiped my face, and stepped out of the room, following the hallway back toward the side entrance. Outside, the air was cooler, less curated. Lazaro stood near the carport, hands in his jacket pockets, his eyes searching mine. I overheard Callista 2 nights ago, he said without greeting. She was on the phone. I only caught part of it, but she said she wanted you drowsy. Tonight. My blood ran still. She said that? He nodded. It was vague. She didn't say how, but she kept repeating, it has to feel natural, she won't question it. Like she was rehearsing. She's controlling this entire evening. I clenched my jaw. Of course she is. That's what she does. That's what they all do. I thought you should know, he said, reaching into his coat. I had my recorder running. It's not perfect, but it's something. He handed me a small silver voice recorder, the kind barely anyone used anymore. I took it, hesitating only a second before pressing play. The audio crackled to life. Callista's voice came through, hushed but distinct. She'll be too groggy to realize what she signed. I didn't know what she meant yet, but I knew what came next wouldn't be about forgiveness. The moment I stepped back into the living room, I felt it in my bones. This wasn't just a gathering. It was a production. And I wasn't the headliner. Callista was in the middle of a circle near the dessert table, her posture effortless, her smile polished. Guests leaned in, captivated as she recounted what it was like to handle everything, while I was in recovery, her tone modest, but unmistakably centered on her own effort, her own sacrifice. People clapped. One even said, "What would this family do without you?" I stood still, hands folded just to keep them from shaking. The answer echoed inside me. They'd probably let me disappear. Then Valora's voice cut through the room like the sharp pop of a champagne cork. Before we wrap up, I just want to say one more thing. She stood by the TV screen, her hand resting lightly on Callista's shoulder, as if to say, "This is who we applaud." Kezia has been through so much, she began, pausing like it cost her to say even that. But as we all know, she doesn't always make the best choices. Laughter, nervous at first, then more open as Callista chimed in, chuckling, "That's why I handle the family stuff now." They laughed again, louder this time. I felt my mouth dry, my fingertips numb. Then the screen came to life behind them. It was a montage. Photos of me in a hospital bed, eyes closed, machines humming, clips of nurses fluffing pillows, doctors consulting charts. Not once did I speak in any of the videos. Not once did they show me standing, walking, recovering. Gone was the clip I'd recorded on day 10 of my rehab stay, where I said, clearly, no one gets to write my story but me. They'd cut my courage and left in only my silence. I turned away, my throat aching. At the drink station, I found a familiar face, one of the older neighbors, someone who'd known me since I was little. "Where's Lazaro?" I asked, low. She looked confused. "Wasn't he here earlier? I thought I saw him by the garden gate." I moved through the house until I found someone else. A cousin, one of the few who knew better than to pretend. "Have you seen Lazaro?" He frowned. "Your mom asked him to leave, said this was private family stuff." My stomach dropped. She'd uninvited the only person who had stood by me, the only one who believed me without needing proof. I found Valora in the kitchen, arranging wine bottles with the staff, like she ran a country club. "You sent Lazaro away?" I asked, voice sharp. She didn't look up. "He stirs the wrong energy." "Wrong for who?" I challenged. "The truth?" She turned to face me, that smile carved into her face like marble. "You've always been so reactive, Keziah. Maybe if you learned to filter your emotions, people would take you more seriously." I opened my mouth, but what was there left to say? I walked out. The night air hit me like a second slap, but at least it was honest. I texted Lazaro. "You were right. This was never about me." His reply came quickly. "Check your old email. I sent something last week. You didn't open it." I walked to the far end of the driveway, sat on the stone bench beside the rosemary bushes, and opened my inbox. One unread message, forwarded from an unknown address. Subject line, "Provisional Power of Attorney Document, Pending Review." I opened the attachment. My eyes scanned the document. My name, my supposed consent, my signature. I didn't remember signing anything, but I knew exactly who wanted it signed. I sat at the edge of the bed in the guest room, blinking down at the document. The lines blurred not from tears, but from disbelief. Legal terms, all tidy and confident, laid out in crisp black type. My name, printed as the principal, but Callista's name, full and bold, listed as my temporary medical proxy and financial representative. Temporary, it said. Provisional. The language was slippery, calculated to seem harmless, except it wasn't. I reread the final clause again, the one stating that the document had been signed during a period of diminished capacity. I never agreed to this, I said aloud, the words brittle. I never signed this, did I? My voice cracked halfway through. I didn't know if it was from rage, shame, or that gnawing self-doubt Callista had always been good at planting. I picked up my phone and called Lazaro. He answered immediately. You saw it? Yes, I said, and I don't remember signing anything. Nothing. There was a pause, just long enough to make my pulse pound. I overheard her on the phone, he said. 2 nights ago, she was talking to someone named Dorian, from the insurance company. I stood up, pacing the length of the room. And? She told him she needed the paperwork expedited before you fully came back online. Her words, not mine. Jesus! She didn't say what the paperwork was, but now it makes sense. Of course it did. It always made sense once it was too late. When you were in the hospital, Lazaro added, you were sedated for a day, right? After that second surgery? Yes. I think someone used that window to slide papers in front of you. Something about signing discharge orders. That's how they get it done. One initial, and suddenly they're in control. I closed my eyes. The pieces didn't fall into place gently. They stabbed. Downstairs, the sound of laughter echoed from the courtyard again. I tucked the document into my bag and walked out of the guest room. I didn't bother fixing my hair or straightening my dress. Let them see me angry. Near the fireplace, Valora and Callista were chatting with 2 women I vaguely recognized from the neighborhood committee. A tray of desserts sat untouched on the coffee table. I stood at the edge of the carpet. Did you forge my name? I asked, my voice flat. Callista looked up, smile frozen in place. Excuse me? The power of attorney document, my signature's on it, but I didn't sign it. Valora's eyes narrowed slightly. Keziah, can we not do this now? I'm doing it now, I said. Why would Callista be granted legal control over my medical and financial decisions without my consent? Callista's tone turned syrupy. We needed to keep things moving, Kez. Bills don't wait for recovery. You weren't exactly responsive. I took a step closer. So you decided to become me? Valora exhaled, stepping in. She did it out of love. You always overthink things. You've always been sensitive. No, I snapped. You don't get to call this love. You don't get to shrink it down into something noble just because it worked for you. Silence fell like a stone. One of the neighbors cleared her throat and walked away. I looked at Callista. You want control? Take the flowers, take the credit, but you don't get to take my signature. And I walked out. The night air wrapped around me, bracing. Guests murmured behind me. Some glanced in my direction with curiosity. Others avoided my gaze. I didn't care. I reached the stone path that led to the front of the house. Just before I turned the corner, I stopped, opened my bag, and pulled out the folded speech I'd carried with me all evening. I walked back inside just far enough to find the gift table. I placed the speech squarely in the center, on top of the stack of candles, throw blankets, and store-bought inspirational quote frames. Then I turned and walked away again. Outside, Lazaro was waiting near the curb, parked under a streetlight. When he saw me, he stepped out and held up a small USB drive. This, he said, has the footage from the hospital lobby, including your real signature and theirs. I took it without a word, closing my fist around it like it was the only thing keeping me steady. "Time to decide what kind of recovery this really is," he said. I didn't hesitate. "If healing meant burning everything that poisoned me," I said quietly. I was finally ready to light the match. The mirror didn't lie, but it didn't flatter either. I stood in the dim light of the guest bathroom, hands pressed against the cool porcelain sink, my reflection steadier than expected. My skin looked pale, but not weak. My eyes, though tired, held something firm beneath the surface. They thought I'd fold, unravel quietly in the name of gratitude. They'd banked on my silence. But I wasn't cracking, not tonight. I slid the USB Lazaro gave me into the inside pocket of my jacket, close to my chest. It wasn't evidence yet. It was a promise. Back outside, I walked beyond the chatter and paper lanterns, far enough to make a call without eyes on me. The number from the forwarded email still sat open on my phone. I tapped it. "Parsons and Henley Legal," a woman answered crisply. "This is Keziah Morgan. I received a document through your firm, a power of attorney I don't remember signing." There was a pause, then rustling. "Yes, I see it here. You were marked as being under temporary cognitive impairment at the time of signature. That's how the authorization was pushed through. Fast-tracked." "Impairment?" My voice turned to stone. "Based on what?" "Medical evaluation submitted from an internal partner at your insurer." I already knew the name before she said it. "Dorian Price," she confirmed. "You know him?" "Yes," I said, cold. "I used to trust him." "Legally," she added, "it's still under review. But yes, this would allow your proxy to access a wide range of accounts." And they did. 2 hospital requests and a pharmacy transfer, all in the last 3 weeks. So my vulnerability had become a transaction, an opportunity. I ended the call and walked back into the patio. The buzz of the party hadn't dulled. If anything, it had grown louder. Callista stood near the archway leading to the garden, smiling for a photographer I hadn't noticed earlier, probably here for a lifestyle column or another sponsored spread on family resilience. She posed naturally, her hand resting on Valora's shoulder, both of them glowing in curated sincerity. I stepped into the frame without invitation. "Would you like to hear how my recovery actually went?" I asked the reporter, voice even. Callista spun, her tone polished and immediate. "Oh, she's still recovering. Emotionally fragile, you know." I didn't flinch. That's what she always says when I tell the truth. The reporter glanced between us, clearly unsure if this was a photo op or a developing scene. I looked down at my dress. Powder blue, stiff, unfamiliar. "Even this outfit wasn't mine," I added, voice sharper now. "They dressed me like someone else's idea of safe, controlled, fragile." Callista stepped forward, still smiling, voice lower. "You're spiraling. Let's not do this." "We already are," I replied. "Just not on your script." I turned to find Lazaro at the edge of the patio, watching silently. I walked toward him and said, "I need to go to the hospital. I want my full file. No more filters." He nodded once, then led the way to his car. The ride was quiet, tense in the way silence is when it has weight. The hospital was still open under night lighting. Administrative staff shuffled papers behind reception, and the waiting room was mostly empty. I stepped to the desk. "I'm requesting my medical file. All records, all provider notes." The woman behind the counter looked up. "You already have a power of attorney on file. Someone else made that request last week." My spine straightened. "Who?" She tapped, squinted, then replied, "Callista Morgan." Of course. She had already been inside my chart. But now I was coming for hers. "Callista already pulled a full summary. Said you authorized it." The clerk at the hospital said it like it was nothing. Like it was just another routine request on a boring Thursday afternoon. My name, my records, my history, handed over without a blink, on a lie I hadn't even been told yet. My mouth didn't move at first. My mind just throbbed with silence. She hadn't just slipped into my recovery. She'd dug into my records, rewritten my chart like she was authoring a biography she had no right to touch. She's not just rewriting my present, I muttered, more to myself than to anyone. She's rewriting my past. Lazaro was beside me, quiet, reading the clerk's reaction. Can we request a printout of all record accesses? He asked. The woman nodded and stepped away. Minutes later, we sat in the small waiting alcove off the lobby, going line by line through the printout. There it was. Dorian's name. Verification via email. Approval time-stamped less than 48 hours after I left intensive care. And then the attached file. A doctor's note. Brief, cold, and damning. Patient exhibits signs of emotional instability post-surgery. Recommend oversight for decision-making related to discharge and finances. Signed by a doctor I'd never met. They didn't just gaslight me in the kitchen, I whispered. They submitted it into the system. They institutionalized it, Lazaro replied, handing me the paper. This isn't just personal now, it's reputational. By the time we returned to the house, the sun had lowered, casting a peach-hued glow across the patio. Guests still lingered, some sipping wine, others taking selfies beneath the garden trellis Callista had adorned with her initials. It looked like a wedding, but the bride was Fame, and Callista was walking her down the aisle. Someone had just posted a new selfie with her. Hero caregiver, it read. So proud to know this woman. I scrolled through the comments. She saved her sister's life. What an angel! A true example of grace under pressure. All of it public, all of it fiction. I opened the comment box, typed a single sentence, and hit send. I didn't need saving. I needed truth. A new DM buzzed my inbox. From someone I didn't know. Hey, I'm sorry. I honestly thought you were her nurse. The way she introduced you. It was surreal. Like watching a movie where your role had been recast without notice. I didn't reply. I didn't need to. The sentence was its own mirror. Later that evening, I walked inside for water and found Valora waiting near the island counter. Her face was tight, her arms crossed. You're stirring up drama, she said quietly. This night was meant to heal. Heal who? I asked. The woman using my story for likes? Callista has done nothing but help. No, she helped herself. To my records, to my agency, to my name. Valora's gaze sharpened. You need to be careful, Keziah. Callista isn't the one looking unstable right now. There it was. The line. The threat buried in concern. I didn't answer. I turned, walked back outside, and tried to steady my breath. Every inhale felt like it carried splinters. That night, after everyone had gone and the patio lights had been switched off, I sat in the guest room scrolling through my email. A new message from the medical board flashed at the top of my inbox. Subject: Flagged psychological history. Inquiry notice. They were trying to bury me while I was still breathing. If they wanted silence, they should have kept me out of their files. I sat in the car, rereading the email on my phone's screen, the blue glow spilling across my lap. The words were clinical: inquiry, flagged behavior, ethics review. But the threat pulsed beneath them like a second heartbeat. The medical board was opening a file on me. Not Callista, not Dorian, me. This isn't about family anymore, I told Lazaro quietly, staring at my reflection in the side mirror. They're trying to dismantle who I am in public. He didn't answer. He didn't have to. I printed the email at his apartment and tucked it next to the USB. The recording had been queued up already. Lazaro pressed play again so we could be sure. Once it's in the system, no one questions it, Callista's voice echoed. She's too unstable to notice anyway. I closed my eyes. I could see her as she said it. Perfect posture, hand twirling the edge of her hair, pretending empathy even in private. She's better off under care, at least she's quiet then. She wasn't just manipulating our family. She was orchestrating something systemic, social, legal, medical, a sabotage so thorough it looked like love from a distance, It was time. We drove back just as the party reached its final act. The lights had dimmed inside, and a closing toast was underway in the living room. Laughter and clinking glasses created a soft hum of celebration, one last round of applause for Callista's carefully curated show. I didn't speak as I walked in. I set my laptop down near the TV and quietly connected it to the smart display. No one noticed at first. They were too busy sipping wine and nodding along to Callista's gratitude speech, delivered with polished humility. The screen flickered, and then her voice filled the room. "She's too unstable to notice anyway." Every face turned, glasses lowered. Conversations froze mid-sentence. On screen, the recording continued. Callista's tone casual, surgical. "Once the report is in the system, the board won't ask questions. I mean, look at her. This whole recovery thing. She's barely functioning." Valora shot up from her chair. "Turn it off!" she hissed, rushing toward the console. Lazaro blocked her, arms calmly at his sides. "I wouldn't." Callista stood frozen near the fireplace, her mouth parted, but no words came. The crowd, our friends, our family, her sponsors, began to murmur. One woman, a wellness coach I vaguely recognized from Instagram, stood abruptly and left without a word. A man in the back whispered something to his wife. Someone else started recording. The video ended in silence. I stepped forward. "I didn't humiliate anyone," I said clearly. "That happened when they decided my recovery was a brand opportunity, when they turned my hospital bed into a stage." Valora's voice trembled now. "You didn't have to do this in front of everyone." "But you did," I said, locking eyes with her. "When you edited my video, when you cut my voice out and played my silence for applause." Callista's eyes finally met mine. There was something close to panic there now, the kind that creeps in when the mask starts to slip. Outside, the flash of red and blue reflected across the glass windows. Police. Just a neighborhood call, nothing to do with us, but it was enough to shatter what illusion remained. Callista turned to me. Her voice was low, defensive. "What are you going to do now?" I picked up my purse, sliding the USB and email printouts safely inside. "What you never expected," I said. "I'm going to finish recovering." And this time, recovery would mean no one else held the microphone but me. The house felt hollow in the aftermath. The clinking glasses had stopped. The polite laughter had been smothered into silence. I walked through the living room slowly, past chairs still warm from where people had sat just minutes ago. Half-eaten cake slices, napkins with wine rings, a wilted bouquet knocked sideways near the piano. The energy had drained out like a slow leak, and what remained was just the shell. No one tells you how quiet the cleanup will be when a performance ends. I made my way down the hallway, the weight of the night settling deep in my spine. Every footstep echoed off the tiles, each one louder than the last. Callista had locked herself in her room, the door shut like a final act. Valora was in the kitchen, her back to me, shoulders shaking. I expected grief. What I got was blame. "You embarrassed the family," she muttered without turning around. Her hands gripped the edge of the sink. I stood in the doorway. "No, I exposed the truth. There's a difference." She finally faced me, her eyes red, not from guilt, but from disappointment. "There were other ways, Keziah. Quiet ways. Those quiet ways were killing me." Before she could answer, my phone buzzed. A local news outlet had tagged me in a post. The headline read, "Recovery Party Turns to Family Feud." Underneath it, a polished photo of Callista standing beside the wellness coach who left early. The article praised her poise under pressure, while describing my actions as erratic and out of character. I didn't throw the phone, I didn't scream. Instead, I opened my messages and typed out a reply to the journalist. "If you're interested in the full story, I'm available for an interview. I have documentation, audio, and medical records. Your call." Then I hit send. Later that night, after the dishes were cleared and the air had grown heavy with fatigue, I wandered back into the guest room. I opened the closet to retrieve my suitcase and spotted a box tucked away on the top shelf. Curious, I pulled it down and flipped open the lid. Photos. Dozens of them. Most of them from old birthdays and holidays. In one frame, I stood between my parents, awkwardly smiling, but half my body had been torn away. Literally. The picture had been ripped, and only part of me remained. And then, I saw it. The necklace they'd given me during the party, the one wrapped in velvet with a card signed "For Our Brave Girl," was lying in the box. I held it up, recognizing the small dent near the clasp. It had been mine years ago, a childhood gift I'd lost, or thought I had. Even their gifts were rebranded grief. I sat on the bed, turning the pendant over in my hand, the room still and silent. The rage had dulled now, replaced by something quieter. Not forgiveness. Not yet. But clarity. Lazaro knocked once and stepped in without speaking. He handed me a cup of tea, then sat at the edge of the bed like he'd done this 100 times before. "This wasn't revenge," I said. "I know," he replied. "It was survival." He nodded slowly. "And you're still surviving. That's what scares them most." I smiled at that. A small one, but real. Just as I set the cup down, my phone lit up again. A voicemail notification from the hospital. I tapped in, then listened. "This is Supervisor Hendricks from Human Resources. We'd like to schedule a meeting with you to review some flagged professional behavior in your recent recovery period. Please return this call at your earliest convenience." I didn't flinch. I just opened my laptop, inserted the USB, and began uploading the full audio file to my secure drive. They wanted to ruin me behind the scenes. Now the whole scene's got new lighting. The conference room at St. Martin's Medical felt colder than usual, like the air conditioning had been dialed up just to see if I'd shiver. I didn't. I walked in with my back straight, my folder tucked neatly under one arm. 3 board members waited, flanked by 2 legal advisors and a representative from HR. Polite smiles, paper cups, no handshake. "Ms. Morgan," one of them nodded. "Thanks for coming." I slid the folder onto the center of the table. "Before we begin, I'd like to submit this." Inside was everything. Audio files, timestamps, emails, the forged document, and a copy of my medical chart. Unaltered. Truth. Packed in manila. They planned to corner me. But I came in with the map. The chair of the board adjusted his glasses as he read the first page. Then another. Someone clicked on the USB. Callista's voice spilled into the room, smooth and vicious. "Once the report is in the system, the board won't ask questions. I mean, look at her. This whole recovery thing. She's barely functioning." They listened in silence. A few glanced at one another. By the third clip, one of the advisors pushed his notepad aside. "This changes everything," the chair finally said. "Why didn't you bring this to us sooner?" I met his eyes. "Because I was recovering, and now I'm finished." They reviewed everything. Verified logs, internal memos, system access history. Dorian Price's name came up over and over. File edits, record pulls, recommendations submitted using outdated credentials. "We'll be flagging his access and placing his account under review immediately," HR confirmed. "And Callista Morgan," the chair added, "will be removing her proxy rights effective today. She will be banned from making requests on behalf of any patient until further notice." I should have felt triumphant. But I didn't. Not yet. Lazaro, who had waited just outside, stepped in and handed over his phone. "There's one more thing," I said. "A voicemail from Valora Morgan, my mother." The speaker played out her voice. Calm, syrupy. "Keziah doesn't have to go public with this. Let's not destroy what's left of the family over paperwork. If she drops it, we'll support her return, quietly. She can still have her career." One of the board members exhaled hard. Another leaned forward. "Even their apologies came with instructions," I said. "They thanked me for coming, said they'd be in touch within the week." I nodded, shook no hands, and walked out. Outside, the sky had shifted. Warm amber streaked across the buildings as the sun began to sink. I felt lighter, but not quite lifted. Back at home, I opened my laptop. A message had come in from the same journalist who'd written the initial article that called me unstable. I'd like to hear your version, if you're willing to talk. I was. We set the interview for Friday, and when it came, I told everything, start to finish. I brought documents, played audio, showed the screen recording of Callista posting the manipulated clip of me disoriented during recovery. Here's what she posted, I said. Then, here's the full video, from my phone, no edits. The journalist blinked twice. That's not even close to the same story. No, I said, but it's the truth. By Monday, the article ran with a new title. This woman wasn't broken. She was betrayed. Comments flooded in. Callista's apology feels forced. This is why women don't report abuse in families, because it looks like this. Keziah deserves a damn medal, not a diagnosis. I didn't reply to any of them. I just watched. 2 days later, a handwritten letter arrived. No return address, but I didn't need one. You got what you wanted. Now leave us alone. I folded the paper slowly and placed it beside my badge. What I wanted? No. What I earned. There was still one more door to close. But this one, I would lock from the outside. The morning light spilled through my apartment window like quiet permission. I sat at my desk, fingers resting on a blank page, the tip of my pen hovering just above the paper. For once, I wasn't writing for them. Not for apologies, not for explanations. This letter was for someone else entirely, someone I hadn't protected enough. Myself. Dear younger me, you won't be the favorite. You won't be the one they defend at parties or frame in the center of the mantle. But that won't be your failure. And it won't last forever. You'll learn how to stand where no one made space. You'll speak even when they mute you. And eventually, quietly, you'll become your own advocate. I signed it with just my first name. That was all I needed now. The day moved slowly. Still, I didn't rush it. I'd spent too many years rushing to prove something to people who never intended to see me. In the late afternoon, I checked my mailbox and found an envelope. Thin, handwritten, familiar. No greeting. No return address. I didn't know how to stop her. That was it. My father's handwriting. His version of closure. One sentence, no punctuation, no name. He hadn't stopped her. And now he was hoping I'd accept that as enough. I folded the letter in half and slid it behind a family photo still sitting on my bookshelf. It was the one they gave me years ago, me and Callista, and our parents at a county fair. Half of the photo had faded under the sun that streamed in through that window every morning. It didn't matter. That frame never really held all of me anyway. On my dresser was the necklace I'd worn the night of the party. I picked it up gently, turning it in my hand. It wasn't new. It wasn't even meant for that night. It had once belonged to Idala, my grandmother, the only person who ever looked at me and didn't try to fix what she thought was broken. She passed 2 weeks ago, quietly. No ceremony, no demands, no guilt-tripped gatherings, just a small notice in the paper and a handwritten card she left for me under her pillow. Stay stubborn, baby girl. You come from bone, not sugar. I kept that card in my wallet. Grief came in steady waves, but this one was different. This wasn't sorrow that begged for understanding. It was grief shaped like steel, the kind that teaches you to stop waiting for apologies and start collecting your own peace. That night, I opened my laptop. The chain of emails from Callista was still there, neatly stacked like trophies of manipulation. I hovered over the first one, the one where she copied my doctor without telling me. Delete. The next one, her fake birthday invitation on my behalf. Delete. Her last message. We should talk. I think it's time. I blocked her number. I didn't need the last word. I had the last decision. I started a donation box with items from the party. The throw blanket, the wine glasses etched with her initials, the ugly frame engraved, "Family is forever." I packed each item like closing a file. But I kept one thing, the name card. the one from my seat that night. Misspelled. Bent. Wrong. I didn't keep it to remember them. I kept it to remember how I finally stopped letting people misspell me and call it love. The next afternoon, Lazaro and I walked through the plaza downtown. Spring was beginning to bloom in the corners of adobe walls, and the scent of roasted chilies floated from a vendor cart nearby. We passed a mural being painted across the side of an old bookstore. The artist stood on a ladder, carefully tracing letters in bold strokes. She stood in the fire and chose not to scream. Lazaro nudged me gently. "That one sounds like you." I smiled, not sad. "No," I said. "That one is me." That evening, I returned home, kicked off my shoes, and dropped my keys on the counter. The space felt different now. Not louder, just clearer. My phone buzzed. Subject: speaking opportunity. Women in medical leadership panel. I didn't open it right away. I let it sit. Not out of fear, but readiness. I looked at the screen, breathed deeply, and whispered aloud to no one but myself. This time, they'll say my name right. The email from the Women in Medical Leadership panel waited in my inbox for 3 days. I didn't open it right away. Not because I was unsure, but because I wanted to choose the moment myself. After everything, that was the point. Reclaiming choice. When I finally clicked, the message was short and direct. "We're honored to invite you to share your story in our keynote session. Your experience has sparked critical conversations. We hope you'll lend your voice to the stage it deserves." I hit reply. Accepted. It wasn't just a seat at the table. It was the table I'd rebuilt from the rubble they left me in. 3 days later, I found myself standing outside my childhood home one last time. No announcement, no appointment. Just me, a manila envelope in one hand and the past knocking inside my chest. Callista answered the door. Her face dropped the moment she saw me. "You shouldn't be here," she said. "I know," I replied. "But you've been in my life uninvited for years. I figured one drop-in couldn't hurt." I stepped in before she could block the way. Valora appeared from the kitchen, lips pressed thin. "I won't take long," I said, setting the envelope on the hallway table. Callista opened it. Inside, a printed screen cap of the viral clip she once edited to mock me, side by side with the original. Her voice, her intent, uncut. "This is being submitted in court," I said. "Defamation, emotional abuse. This wasn't petty, it was targeted." Valora opened her mouth. I held up a hand. "I didn't post it to shame you," I said. "I posted it to stop you." Silence held the air like steam rising from hot stone. Callista swallowed. "So you want to ruin us now?" I looked at her. Finally looked, not through old memories or guilt, but through clarity. "No," I said. "I want to end the part where you rewrite me." Valora's eyes flashed, but she didn't speak. "There's more," I added, pulling out the second sheet. A cease and desist letter, stapled to a countersuit. Fraud, misrepresentation, unauthorized access, financial exploitation. Every offense Callista committed while I was under anesthesia had a line item now, and consequences. "You raised the wrong daughter to underestimate me," I told Valora. I left the papers there. I didn't need to watch them read it. I didn't need to hear the gasps or witness the blame pass like a baton again. I'd already been through that relay enough times. Back home, the full video clip had gone viral. Not the edit, not the mockery, the real one. Side-by-side footage showing what she posted versus what happened. Me, standing, lucid, talking about resilience, spliced into Callista's fake narrative of mental collapse. The internet didn't stay quiet. Her accounts flooded with comments. "Why would you lie about your sister's health?" "So it was all a PR stunt?" "Kezia deserves justice, not your tears." Callista posted a tearful apology video, but this time, no one clapped, no one sponsored. The comment section turned into a wall of receipts. A fan-made TikTok edit surfaced hours later, pairing my story with the caption, the woman who never had the mic, until she built her own stage. That evening, I stood backstage at the Hyatt Event Center, dressed in navy and calm. The panel room buzzed on the other side of the curtain. Dozens of women, medical professionals, administrators, students, waiting. I walked on stage when my name was called. I spoke clearly, no script, just memory. I've learned that forgiveness isn't the absence of justice. It's knowing when to stop bleeding for people who call it family. I don't need them to see me anymore. I see myself now, and that's enough. The applause didn't explode. It built, slow, strong, honest. Afterward, as I walked off stage, I didn't look back. I didn't need them to say my name anymore, because now the world already knew it.